There's only one question we have is, are we closed or open? The only decision you can ever make is, are you open or are you closed? Right? If you're open, the moment loves you open and you love the moment open. And if you're closed, the moment is stillborn. When you recover the memory of your future, which is needed by all that is, it's only from that place that your life reconfigures. And it's only from that place that you have the energy, the capacity to engage your trauma. Desire. Desire is not incidental to me. I quite literally am desire. When I'm in the fullness of my desire, I don't ask what's the purpose of reality. And in that sense, Sab quite literally causes there to be more God in the world.
Wow. My mind was blown after this conversation with Dr. Rabbi Marc Gafni. It was such an honor and pleasure to have him join me for this conversation. Dr. Gafni is a visionary thinker, philosopher, social activist, and known for his source code teaching on the evolutionary self. He's had over 25 books published, and right now is working on this great library to share a new story of humanity and how we need to go from Homo sapiens to Homo amor. I'm really hoping this is the first of many conversations with Dr. Gafni. And like I said, I'm really excited. If you enjoy deep philosophical thinkings and ideas around the fundamental fabric of human existence, I actually have never heard anyone speak so articulately, passionately, enthusiastically, and as well thought out as Dr. Gafni. And this is something that I've seeked for 20 years. So when I say that, I mean, really, it did blow my mind. And if you like that kind of thing, this is the one for you. Dr. Gafni has also kindly offered some free gifts for the listeners. So down below, you can find some links to get some downloads for more of his material. And of course, if you want to find him, the links will be there. Now, before we get into the show, two things. One, if you haven't yet subscribed, if you could do that, it really helps out the channel with it still being a new channel in its infancy. So that would be amazing. And two, if you like these types of conversations and you want to come and join me every Thursday, I'm hosting a free group call where basically the conversations I'm having with people on the podcast, we just have as a group. I know a lot of the people that will be listening to this might find it difficult to have these kinds of conversations in everyday life. So I want to host that environment every Thursday. We've just got started and it really is a beautiful space. So if you feel called to that, the link below is to register. You can get the link for the Zoom call and come and join that. All right. Thank you so much for being here. I really hope you love this episode. See you on the inside. Dr. Rabbi Marc Gafni, you gorgeous man.
Mm-hmm. It's madly delightful to be with you, sweetheart. Yay. Beloved. Yay. Let's do this.
I've been so excited for this one. So excited. I listened to you with the 3 episodes you did with Aubrey.
Mm-hmm. Aubrey Marcus, right?
Yes. And I listened to them all. And as I listened to them, and there were 3 hours each, they were released back to back. I went one. And I remember the first time I heard one, I thought, okay, there's a lot. I kept having to go back a little bit. Like, I need to hear those words again. Because there were some words that I've heard the words before, but it felt like they had new meaning, new life, and new context in the way that you were saying them. So I had to go back and listen again. Okay, yeah. So I did 1, I did 2, I did 3. And then I was like, I need to do it again. So I went back, I did 1, I did 2, I did 3. Awesome. And then I did it a third time, 1, 2, and 3.
This is awesome.
And what was amazing was that I felt it, but it seemed to coincide with just some of my own journey where I felt like I was kind of going through this realization of how much of myself that I hadn't been allowing to come to the party, that I'd been saying, and all throughout my 20s, in fact, I had the realization that, and we're really getting straight into the weeds here, but I, around the age of 19, stopped calling myself Sabri and I started calling myself Sab. And I almost felt like between the ages of 19 and up until November last year, I really kind of created Sab as almost like this egoic kind of structure who almost helped me get out of hell which is where I felt like I was existing before. And I just really struggled with my emotions and how I felt about myself. And and it wasn't until just November last year where I realized it's okay to be Sabri. And when I
Gorgeous.
was hearing you talk about it's actually your it's your responsibility to show up in your entirety. And that is the only path, not to happiness, to joy.
Right. Beautiful. And
And I
right.
felt it. I felt it so much, like almost like oh, it really is okay to be me. So I came across this series of podcasts at an exact time in my life where I seem to just be having some really kind of powerful unravelings. And when I was just hearing the things you were saying, I was like, it's almost like this man knows me. It was almost like, no, he's just speaking to me. This is just me and you. So it was
Awesome.
amazing.
And that's it actually is the way the intimate universe works, right? We find each other because there are invisible lines of connection. And we actually know that's true. There's non-local reality. John Stuart Bell, right? Two particles that touch never lose connection. But we know in general that there are structures of allurement that guide reality. If you actually know what moves reality, I would use that word allurement. In other words, underneath the forces of gravity, for example, there's allurement.
Mm.
Allurement is the structure of reality. Right? Cells come together uniquely through allurement. Human beings come together uniquely because there's a set of allurements that draw us to each other. So, for example, let's just take your example, right? So you've got like, Marc Gafni's kind of living his life, and then, this happens and that happens. And then there's a set of things that come together. Then Aubrey and Mark meet, and we met actually, X amount of time ago in Miami. I didn't know him. He didn't know me. Right. And we had this kind of very, very intense encounter. He writes me a note on a napkin the next day that says, let's go do everything. And that this particular podcast was the very first one we did. He said just kind of reshaped and formed his world in a very beautiful way. So Aubrey, it took him like 6 steps of allurement, me 6 steps of allurement. Along the way, Saab is living his life. And that brings him to this, to this, to this, which then brings him right to that Aubrey podcast through an entire set of allurements and relationships and people. And then it comes together in this unique moment where those allurements actually meet. And if we're open to the moment, because there's only one question we have is, are we closed or open?
Mm.
The only decision you can ever make is, are you open or are you closed? Right? And if you're open, the moment loves you open and you love the moment open. And if you're closed, the moment is stillborn, right? It dies, right? It can never birth what it needs to birth. And so both of us had to be open to a series of unique allurements that actually created that interstices, that meeting, even though we didn't know each other.
Mm.
So if you actually get what you're actually describing very beautifully, because you're a beautiful man, you're describing the intimate universe. That the intimate universe is a web, not merely of rational structures, but of allurements, which means that the invitation of my life is to clarify my allurements. Because Sab is a unique set of allurements. That's what it means to be a unique self. I'm a
Mm.
unique set of allurements, and what allurements are actually mine, what have been imposed upon me by culture. So I know how to perform those allurements, but I'm actually not allured. I actually don't really want to be here. It's not
Mm.
actually resonating in the unique self symphonic signature of who I am. And so the description is beautiful. And I'm delighted to be with you. And I'm in your living room. So you guide us and take us inside, brother. Okay.
Absolutely, thank you for that. It's interesting what you said there about the allurement and how you either are open or closed to it. And one of the things that seems to have been unfolding for me since November, and this real kind of stepping into the entirety of who I am, feeling like it's actually okay to show up with all of the elements of me that I thought maybe at one point weren't okay. Like I'm emotional. And sometimes when I talk about things so passionately, I cry. And
Yeah,
I'm quite
yeah,
childlike, like I'm quite playful and I laugh a lot. I'm very smiley. And for a lot of the time I thought that wasn't okay. Like I'm meant to be, oh
yeah.
no, that isn't me. This
I
is
want to be
me.
stopped. Yeah, I mean, it's gorgeous, right? And by the way, just two things, and it's completely beautiful. I can't get through a movie without crying in the first 20 minutes. I cry through movies all the time, right? And in general, I don't trust people whose tears are not close to the surface
Mm,
because, and tears themselves are an entire world. And I was actually privileged a bunch of years ago to write a book on tears that's on Amazon. We're now re-editing it and re-releasing it. But tears are unimaginably important. You actually have to keep almost like a diary of your tears, right? A diary of tears, because tears have a voice. Tears speak, and every set of tears, which comes from a different matrix, has a different chemical structure, right? So tears of joy have one feeling, right? Tears of ecstasy have another feeling. Tears of grief have a different feeling. And literally, not just a different feeling, they have a different chemical composition. And
mm,
every kind of tear, right, actually rips apart. It's a tear, it tears open, right, the very fabric of reality and opens possibilities. And so tears have a voice, they have a story they're telling. And you have to trust your tears. And when a person doesn't have access to their tears, they actually become untrustable. And then play. My friend who we became friendly. It's a long story. We became friendly at the Pope's summer residence when a group of us were gathered. He had invited us to be there with him in maybe 2006. And he goes by the public title, His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And one of in my encounters with him, and in the end, it's a long story. We actually had a fight in public, and in order to make up in our fight, he invited me to Dharamsala. It was a good fight, and he took my ritual skull cap that I was wearing, and he said, "Come to Dharamsala and get it back." So I did, and I went to Dharamsala, and we spent a decent amount of time playing because play means I'm not instrumental. Play is for its own sake. Play is what the lineages call lishma, lishma, right? For its own sake, lishma, for its own sake, right? I do it for its own sake. And I'm not doing it in order to make an instrumental gain, right? I do it to do it.
yeah.
Non-instrumental, the utter joy of doing something for its own sake. That's why I play. It's why we love children, because when they step into the world of play, they experience the utter radical joy of play for its own sake, right?
Mm,
It's like wow, right? So let's play, my friend. Let's
let's
play.
play.
Yeah.
So the thing that I was going to get to was um, the stepping into myself. The thing that really came up for me in November was how much it was important to be myself. And what you said about the allurement, it almost feels as though you said either you're open or you're closed. And I feel like, and I want to get what you think on this. We have to be open to ourselves, to being ourselves in our entirety, in order to be open to allurement. And if we're closing off ourselves, we're kind of closing off to the allurement.
And so let's find this. Let's find this. So what do we mean by ourselves, right? In other words, and how do we distinguish between kind of like a general kind of human potential new age loveliness, which is lovely and beautiful and holy and
Mm,
fantastic, and something which is actually an actual understanding of the depth of human identity, which integrates the interior sciences, the exterior sciences, and is actually coming from kind of the deepest knowing of what it means to be a human being. So when we say myself, what do we mean? So let's introduce something here, right, which is that every human being is a unique and stunning combination of two dimensions: sameness and uniqueness. We're the same. So Sab and Mark, we're the same, right? We have very similar genetic structure, kind of generally similar in age. You're a little better looking, but basically, right? Kind of two guys, right? Within a kind of general range, same century. Okay, good. And then we're unique, right? And there's a dimension of us which is from an interior perspective and from an exterior perspective is irreducibly unique. So in other words, who am I? I'm the same. We share a common story. And yet, what we hold most deeply in common is our uniqueness. So who is Sab? If I say, who are you? I would say Sab is an irreducibly unique expression of the love intelligence and love beauty and love desire of all that is, that lives uniquely in Sab in a way that it never has, and anyone that ever was, is, or will be. So who are you? You're an irreducibly unique expression of the love intelligence, love beauty, and love desire of all that is, that lives in you uniquely, unlike it lives in any other. And as such, it manifests your unique perspective and your unique gift and your unique quality of intimacy that allow you to fulfill, right, to give, right, to be your unique self in reality in a way that reality desperately needs you to be, because reality needs your service. Reality needs your unique gift. So that's why that's uniqueness, right? So that's who I am in my very core. Now, trauma blocks uniqueness. Trauma obfuscates uniqueness, right? In other words, when I'm in trauma, when I feel attacked or wounded, and I can't relax into the depth of my being, and I'm performing an identity instead of being an identity, and that's a performative identity to cover up, right, the extreme anguish of my own sense of emptiness, or my sense of trauma, or my sense of being violated, or my sense of being wounded. And we're all wounded, and we're all traumatized, and we're all violated, right? Right? Everyone experiences some lack of attunement. That's part of the structure of reality. It's not a mistake. There's extreme trauma, but ordinary trauma is part of the structure of reality. Right? Human beings in their very existence experience what Gurdjieff calls, the shock of separation. Right? In the literature of Kabbalah, of Hebrew wisdom, right, there's what's called the shattering of the vessels, shvirat hakelim, the vessels shatter. Every human being experiences in their life this shattering of the vessels. So it's not an accident. It's not like, oh, you were born to a bad family, the parents didn't quite work, you had a tumultuous childhood. Lots of people have tumultuous childhoods, right? I did, you did, right? And those need to be worked with, and they need to be done appropriate, psychotherapeutic work all has a place and should all be done. And it's that breaking, it's that experience of trauma, which is unique. Every person's trauma is in some sense unique. It's my unique relationship to that trauma that transforms the fate of my life into the destiny of my life. So I've got to be willing to walk through that unique trauma, but in a way in which it calls me to my greatness. It calls me to my uniqueness, and it doesn't define me. Because in other words, the weakness of psychological literature today, and has some very great strengths, it has some very tragic and almost fatal weaknesses. And one of the weaknesses is it assumes an implicit reductive materialist stance, meaning who you are is who you are for these 70, 80, 90 years in this limited manifest materialist world. So in this limited manifest materialist world, what must form you? What must be the hidden formation of your life? Oh, it must be those early years, because there's nothing else. What else could form you? But if you have a larger view, if you actually experience yourself as part of the field of consciousness, part of the field of consciousness which has continuity, right? That actually reality intended you before you were born. You're part of a larger field. You're not just separate self who's defined by this limited materialist reality. You're actually true self. You're part of the entire field. You're indivisible for the field. You're unique self. You're a unique expression of the field. You're an evolutionary unique self, right? You're a unique expression of the evolutionary impulse, which is so much bigger and wider than you. You're actually held by that field. That field intended you. That field desires you. It loves you. It adores you. It needs you. It recognizes you. It chooses you. Well, then all of a sudden, the trauma of, ages 1 through 10 actually can be held a little more lightly, because they're not all of who you are. When all you are is a materialist separate self, then the only force operating on you, right, underneath, that shapes your source code is your early conditioning, your early trauma, your early psychological, social, attachment, style condition. Nothing else exists. But if I'm actually in the field of desire, I'm in the field of Eros. The entire field is moving through me. But I actually experience and receive all the previous generations. And we actually live in that field together. And I'm called forth, right, by my future self, which invites me to my destiny. All of a sudden, all those forces are acting on me. So I don't bypass my trauma, but with that energy, I can then recover my unique self. And with the power of my unique self, move through trauma. You cannot move through trauma only by reorganizing the past. It's the great and tragic weakness in psychology that psychology today says, reorganize the memory of your past and you will become whole. That is a lie. That's an absolute lie, which is at the very core of the Western therapeutic model. You should rework your past. You should do trauma work. It's necessary. You shouldn't bypass it, but it's insufficient. You've got to recover not just a memory of your past, you have to recover a memory of the future. And the memory of the future. Right.
And it also feels like something that you are just beyond that. It feels like so much of the West is focused on, like you say, the separate self, and just that's all you are. And then when we realize, like, to your point, that we're part of the field, that we're part of something far greater, that it feels like that changes the landscape of it so much.
Right. It's the change that changes everything. Literally. I mean, you've got it exactly. The second I actually have a lived experience of the field pouring into me, I'm never merely local. Even my desire, right? I kind of access my desires. My desires aren't my small self desires. It's not this strange experience of desire moving through me. I'm trying to be a good separate self and a good citizen and a good religious person or a good, participant in civic activity. And I'm trying to do my job well. And all of a sudden these desires are moving through me. What are those strange things that are kind of setting me off and breaking the equilibrium of my life and undermining me? No. There's no local desire. That desire is from the field of desire. It's the field of desire moving uniquely through me. It's not sob lost in these kind of pathological desires that are shaped by some, set of broken attachments in childhood that therefore get transmuted into kind of, a level of aberrance that he's got to work really hard to hide, which breaks out and, sneaks, a preview in the world when he's crying too much. No. Yes, some of that might happen, but no. It's more like this. Reality intended sobness. I mean, just get that in your body. Reality intended me. Meaning underneath everything that I am, I was intended. And the experience of being intended is everything. When you actually can say reality intended me, right? And it intended me uniquely. Reality recognizes me. Reality chose Sob. Reality doesn't just love Sob. That's too. Reality adores Sob, right? And reality desires Sob because desire is a structure of reality, right? Desire lives at the cellular level, and the cellular level manifests unique structures of Eros and intimacy. And who is Sob? He's a unique structure of Eros and intimacy, who's an expression of the larger field of Eros, intimacy, and desire, who is chosen, recognized, desired, love adored, and needed by the entire field. I mean, I don't know, who's your favorite British Prime Minister?
Do I have to have one?
It's not a great set of choices, I gotta say. It's not a great set of choices. I got that. But if you had to pick, right, your favorite British Prime Minister, Churchill had a good time during the war, right? He was during the war. Churchill had before the war, after the war, he got complicated, but during the war, he was pretty amazing. I think, is that fair? Is that a fair?
Yeah.
So here's the gig. Winston Churchill calls you up. Hey, right? It's 1943. Hey, Sob, man, I've tracked everything about you. I know your whole gig, and he starts telling you stories about your life, your childhood. You realize he totally knows you. And Sob, here's the deal, man. I need you. Like, I need you. Like, there's something that needs to be done, not just for king and country, but for reality itself. And Sab, I'm telling you, I got all the intelligence. You are the only one that ever was, is, or will be that can actually give this gift to reality. Now, and you listen, you realize it's really Churchill. He really knows everything about you. And he's actually identified this unique capacity that you actually know is true, actually lives in you. You can
Mm.
actually do this. And Churchill sees it. You hang up the phone. Are you depressed? I don't think so. You're elated. You're like, oh my God, right? I was born for this, right? And you're not like, oh my, get me my Prozac, right? Let me go do co-counseling now. Oh, I got to do some co-counseling. Let me get this handled, right? No, right? You're literally, you don't go back and Churchill, I got to get back to you. I got to work on my early attachment issues. Just hold, man. Get back to me in 2 years. I'll get back. That's nonsense. You're called. When you experience yourself being called, you experience yourself being personally addressed by reality. When you recover the memory of your future, which is needed by all that is, it's only from that place that your life reconfigures. And it's only from that place that you have the energy, the capacity to engage your trauma. Because otherwise, your trauma, and I can stay close with me, otherwise, your trauma becomes what we call in this new story of value we're telling, at the center, myself, Zach Stein, and a whole host of us. Ken Wilber's involved, right? Christina Kincaid, Sally Kempton, Mariana Kaplan. There's a whole gang. But at the core of this, I'm trying with my colleagues to articulate what we call this new story of value, which we call cosmoerotic humanism, right? And it's this new story of value in response to the meta crisis and in response to the evolution of consciousness and culture, which we need to respond to the meta crisis and to actually live the way we need to live in this moment in time. And it has new understandings of human identity, new narratives of identity, new narratives of power, new narratives of desire, new narratives of community. And so that's the context we're talking in. And so in order for me to be able to actually engage my trauma, I've got to do that from the place of the eros of my unique self. Eros is, right, the energy of cosmos that moves separate selves to become wholes, right? The radical aliveness of reality that's always seeking deeper contact and greater wholeness. That's Eros. So the Eros of reality lives uniquely as Sab. Sab is a unique configuration of Eros. Now, if Sab is not accessing his irreducible unique self, which doesn't split him from reality, uniqueness is the currency of connection. It allows Sab to play his instrument in the unique self symphony. Sab's instrument is played through his irreducible uniqueness. So if Sab is in his Eros, he can engage his trauma. If he's not in the Eros of his unique self, and he's a separate self doing therapy, what's going to happen is his trauma itself becomes a form of pseudo Eros. And as he gets pseudo erotic energy, it's not genuine Eros. It's the sense of emptiness, and then you got to engage in your trauma work, and you're working. The working of your trauma becomes your unique self, but it's not actually Eros. It's your pseudo Eros. And then you desperately need that experience of aliveness. You can't get it from Eros, which is your unique self. So you've got to get it from your trauma work. So you can never finish your trauma work. You can never get beyond the trauma because it's what's giving you your pseudo Eros. It's creating your pseudo identity, right? So it's actually you get the structural problem. So if I don't engage in what we might call unique self recovery, I can't even begin to work with the shattering, with the breaking of the vessels that happens to everyone in our lives. So we begin to get a narrative of identity here. Who am I? I'm an irreducible, unique expression of the love, intelligence, love, beauty of all that is, that lives in me, as me, and through me, that never was, is, or will be ever again other than through me. And as such, I've got a unique perspective, and I've got a unique gift, and I've got a unique quality of intimacy. And all of those together manifest that gorgeous, unique contribution that can be given and needs to be given by me to reality that all of reality desperately yearns for. That's a good way to get up in the morning, right?
Good way to get up in the morning.
It's a good way to get up in the morning. Cheers. Cheers, man. Cheers. Tea.
Cheers.
I thought talking to England, so I brought tea. Okay.
Nice. I like that. I let the side down. Have sparkling water.
I'm following you, sir. Take me in. Take me in. I'm delighted to talk to you.
So, with what you said there, and the trauma which kind of almost keeps us in separate self, is it the trauma that prevents us from accessing our unique self? Because the trauma, when we experience it, we fragment part of ourselves away. Is that what creates our shadow elements? These parts of us where we experience trauma, we feel like, okay, these parts of me aren't worthy, they're not allowed to be here, so they're fragmented away. And then from that place, we don't live in unique self because we're living in this kind of almost like this partial self, and out of the partial self we almost create like an incomplete identity that's not built in our wholeness, which therefore isn't in our uniqueness.
Yeah, no, that's great, Sab. And let me try and give you a big view of it, and then we can see how it applies personally in your life and just also for everyone's listening. It- all of this is just words until you can feel it and live it in the stories of our lives. Right. And
Yeah.
so we want to get to actually our life stories, but let's try and go and kind of understand the field and the deep dharma of this, the deep principles and values at play. So let's maybe move words for a second. Okay, let's move words for a second. Let's move from trauma to shame. I want to
Mm.
introduce the word shame. So shame is the root of all evil. But I don't mean shame as in, wow, you should be ashamed of yourself. I want you to do a better job. We'll get to that. Let's bracket that for a second. I mean shame in the basic experience that a person has, not that I did something wrong, but that I am wrong, right? Not that I broke a rule, but that I'm broken, right? Not that, you know, something went wrong and I can fix it. No, no, no. Actually, I'm missing a part and they don't make it at the factory anymore. So I can never be fixed. So that experience of shame happens, incepts, shame incepts, right? Incepts. Shame incepts. It enters us very early in life. And shame generally incepts when we have an experience of our aliveness, which is rejected by reality, right? And when we're very young, our goodness and our aliveness are inextricably linked. So, I mean, one of the ways, for example, shame will often incept is in the sexual. So it might be an early sexual experience which gets shamed. We have an experience in the sexual early on because children are sexual, right? They have an experience of a need for touch, a need for
Mm.
nurture, and a need for touch. They experience their own bodies in this way that early psychology called polymorphously perverse, right? That is to say, the full aliveness of the body before the body shuts down. So you might have an experience of your aliveness in your body, and it gets shamed by a parent, by culture, by a caretaker, or just conversely, your home, your mother's, getting the apartment fixed up. She puts you in kind of her bedroom that's not yet painting. There's just a bed there. She's working with the painter outside, and she left her purse there. And you go in, and you're maybe 2.5 years old, and you see this little, I guess it's a crayon or maybe it's lipstick, who knows? And you say, "Well, let me decorate the wall for mommy." And there you kind of start, right? And you're like all excited because you've made this whole white wall all red, which is obviously a very big improvement, right? And you're really excited for mommy to come in so she can see your master Michelangelo work. Mommy comes in and says, "You little bitch," right? And she's furious with you, and you're like, right? In other words, my experience of my aliveness, which I was just delighted creating, which is inextricably linked with my goodness, has now been rejected. So there's an inception of shame, and so that's the original experience of shame, and shame festers in the dark, right? In other words, we have these experiences that incept shame, and then they remain very deeply hidden in us, and they linger and they lurk and they define us. And so shame actually undermines our ability to live in the full Eros of who we are. Now, unique self is an affront to shame, right? Because unique self is me living in my full aliveness. I can be funny and I can be playful and I can have my tears close to the surface and I can be emotional, right? And that's the full wonder of who I am. And then shame kind of recedes because I begin to live in my Eros. Shame blocks Eros. It's a very fundamental principle. Shame blocks Eros. Shame needs to be healed in order to liberate Eros. Now, how do you heal shame? That's a conversation. And so there's really three levels. And I don't know if that's where you want to go now. And I don't want to, I'm a guest in your living room, so I'm going to follow your direction. But there's the whole conversation. What are the levels of healing shame? Because the conversation out there now doesn't get us there. There's a kind of what I would call and she's done some lovely work. I've skimmed it a little bit. I don't know it well, but a Brene Brown is kind of often cited kind of in the shame literature. I think I read, just some skim in one article, and it's good. And she kind of summarizes the psychological literature, as do, 10 or 12 other people. And they talk about kind of telling the story of your shame, right? And that's important. It's important to tell the story of your shame. It's important to liberate your shame. It's important to actually have the experience of telling the story of your shame to someone who loves you dearly, right? And in that fair witness, when you're actually witnessed in telling the story and you see that actually you're not rejected, that you actually tell the story of that shame and you're received, whether it's a sexual story, whether it's an aliveness story, but you tell a story in which, right, you felt radically shamed, and then you're received in your beauty despite that shame, right? You tell the story, you shine light on the shame, then you liberate some dimension of shame. And that's true. That's necessary, but it's insufficient. It's not even close to sufficient, right? You need to go much, much, much deeper into shame. And maybe we'll do at a different time a whole dialogue on shame and then go through really what are the steps, what are the 6-7 steps of healing shame, which is unbelievably important. But at least for now, in this conversation, it's important to say that, we need to trauma is always lined with shame. Shame blocks unique self, right? Because unique self is Eros. Shame blocks Eros. You have to actually do the work of liberating from shame in order to claim your unique self. Yeah, so at least we've touched on that. We've opened that door, which is a critically important door. Yeah. Cheers.
Cheers. Amazing. That's beautiful. So there's something I'd actually written down that I wanted to, when I was listening to one of the podcasts, there's something that stood out to me that I thought was really interesting, which is we aren't static, we are evolving. I am not Sabri and you're not Mark. I'm Sabriing and you are Marking. And I thought that was really interesting, a really interesting idea that we aren't just static. And something else that you'd mentioned as well that I heard that stood out was that love evolves through generations. And what came up for me is that not just love, it seems as though throughout the sabrying and the marking as we go through our lives and we are evolving throughout our lifetime, it seems as though words actually evolve throughout the evolution as well. So for example, like the map of consciousness, Hawkins, is it David Hawkins, Power versus Force, the book? And
there's a bunch of maps. That is one. That's a different conversation, but yes.
Desire is considered to be one of the kind of like a lower paradigm level of consciousness. But then when I heard you speak about the idea that like desire is evolution,
Yeah,
or evolution is desire, maybe both are true, but it made me realize that literally within these, we could say, paradigms, words take on a new meaning and almost like a new life. So for example, love potentially in separate self is, and a lot of people's model for love is it's transactional. I give it to you, you give it to me, we're both doing it, we're both happy, okay, we love each other. But if you stop giving it to me, well, I'm stopping mine. And then we go to maybe true self. Maybe the idea would be that no, like love is a state of being, and that I am love, and that how can I need you to love me or me to love you because I am love. But there may be a unique self we say, and this really stood out for me as well, is that love is a perception.
Yeah,
And it's
good.
my ability to see you, and not just see you, but to accept you and honor you and cherish you in your entirety, in your uniqueness.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. So first up, you're tracking well and beautifully, and thank you. And you made a whole bunch of really important points there. So let's see if we can take one at a time. Okay, let's start with one, and let's split this into three. So the first thing is this realization that I'm not a noun, I'm a verb, right? And so the process of transformation and the process of becoming fully alive and empowered in my life as a unique self, playing my instrument in the unique self symphony, is requires that I denominalize, right? I denoun, right? The denominalization of self. I've got to step out of being a noun, right? This kind of static thing, and I've got to become a verb. Right? So I'm verbing, right? I'm sobbing, right? I'm marking. Now, gorgeously in the original Hebrew, the word for noun or thing and the word for word is the same. So a thing, a davar, is also the word. And the point is, there is no such thing as a thing, right? A thing is a dynamic, transforming, right? Evolving, right? Ever becoming process, right? Reality is this unfolding, gorgeous play, right? This gorgeous movement towards ever higher, deeper, wider expressions of intimacy, of goodness, right? Of truth, right? Of beauty, right? Of value. And I am a unique discretion of reality. I'm a unique configuration of Eros, and I'm always moving towards value, beauty, goodness, truth. And so if I ask someone, tell me what your life's going to look like in 10 years from now, and they think they can answer that question, they're dead, right? But if you think, right, you're a noun. If you think basically the way it's moving is it's a billiard ball, it's a mechanical world, I do this and this will happen and this will happen. No. There's a force of Eros, which is filled with surprise and contingency and delight and right and emergence, right, and radical newness that's moving through you, and you're open. And the word open in Hebrew, hitpachut, the word open means evolution. Evolution, you evolve when you're open, right? Trauma, the demons, right? Right, what the demons do when the demons enter us, when we're lost in kind of self-loathing, right? It's our incapacity to open to new possibility. Right? I actually believe that yesterday defines me. Right? Yesterday becomes my slave driver. The greatest slave driver is the experience that yesterday defines today. The greatest liberation is the realization that tomorrow liberates me from all yesterdays, right, into a new possibility. Now, it doesn't mean that there's not karma. Just stay close to me. There's karma. Of course, there's karma. So Whitehead, the great philosopher who wrote Principia Mathematica with George Bertrand Russell in Cambridge, not far from you, right? Whitehead talks about every moment being an occasion. And that occasion receives all of the past. Right? That's all of my yesterdays. But that occasion also has an irreducible dimension of newness, of emergence, of possibility that didn't exist in any previous moment. So actually, gorgeously, the original word in Hebrew for time is zman, Z-E-M-A-N, and zman, time means invitation. So there's an invitation in this moment, and in this conversation that I get to have, right, with Sab, my little brother, right, there's an invitation not to repeat yesterday, but something in the space in between us and in the space between us in this moment, which is irreducibly new. It's not a repetition. It's different than any moment to come and any moment that's past, right? It's pregnant, right, with a new birth, right? So we want to enter this moment. We want to feel this moment. What does it have to, what's it whispering in our ear? What's it inviting us to? Now, the second I close to this moment, I'm closed to the possibility of this moment, then all I have is the past. Right? In other words, if I'm not actually in, right, this creative advance of radical newness, of novelty, right, that actually lives and inheres, as Whitehead says, in this moment, or the Hebrew masters say, the Zman, the irreducible invitation of this moment, then all I have is all of the karma of previous moments pouring into me, which is all of my attachment breaks and all of my sins, whatever that means to me, and all of my violations, and all of my sense of smallness, and all of my sense of trauma. And then those demons overtake me, right? I liberate myself from demons, and everyone has demons, right? I move from my demons by moving to my daemon. It's from demon to daemon, and daemon is the call of my future. And if you put a 357 Magnum to my head, which I would appreciate you not doing, but if you did, right, you did, and you said to me, right, make my day, right, tell me a definition of God that actually makes some sort of sense. Well, I'd say you can't define God, and then you kind of cock the lever. Say, don't give me you can't define God. Give me something, okay? So I would say God is the possibility of possibility, right? God is the possibility of possibility, right? It's the inherent, infinite possibility that loves you madly, right? So in other words, cosmos is not just structure and mechanics. Cosmos is radically personal. But God's not like a small personal God. It's not. God is ultimate personhood. Right? There's an infinite personhood of divinity. That's why the name of God that I use, and we she whispered it in our ear some time ago, is we call God the infinite intimate. God's infinite, right? The infinity of divine power, and yet this divinity, this infinite divinity that manifests, right, billions and billions of light years and dazzling complexity and unimaginable, chemical structures and atomic superimpositions, right, in an unimaginable field, right, of matter, right, and atom and molecular structure, and then cellular structures, and then organic and organismic structures, and cosmic universes and galaxies, and billions and 100 billion galaxies, right, and all of that which is kind of divinity in third person, all of that lives in me in first person, and then turns to me in second person and says, Sab, man, I'm madly in love with you. It's like, wow, right? It's like, right, the entire energetic, infinitely, unimaginably, dazzlingly, beyond brilliant, all supercomputers exponentialized, can't even begin to touch it. All of that, sitting in a chair, looking at Saab and saying, man, I love that dude in a way that I love no one else. Right? It's a unique quality. There's a quality that lives between Saab and the infinite intimate that doesn't live between Mark and the infinite intimate. Which means, now stay close, it gets so wild when you get the realization of the interior sciences. It means that God, as it were, the infinite intimate, experiences a shocking self-recognition through Saab that he, she, it can't experience through Mark. Because that's what a good friend does. You find a dimension. The reason you love your good friend is because you love them. Love is a perception. I see them. And then in that perception, it actually evokes a new dimension of me. So with your closest friend, when you're hanging with a particular close friend, there's a dimension of Saab that gets to appear because they evoke that dimension, right? So that's my relationship to the infinite intimate, to the divine. There's a dimension of divinity that's actually made manifest, that's actually able to appear in relation with Saab, with the unique quality of intimacy that is Saabness, that can't appear in relationship to Buddha or Lao Tzu, right? Or Moses or Confucius or Jesus, only in relationship to Saab. And to the precise extent that Saab doesn't clarify his trauma, doesn't turn his fate into destiny, he loses the capacity to generate that shocking self-recognition in the infinite intimate, and the worlds are weakened, and kindness loses something of its hold in the world, right? And the energy of allurement, of goodness and truth and beauty isn't quite what it needs to be, and that has an effect, and then it ripples, and it cascades, and it undermines. But to the precise extent that Saab then re-steps into his fullness, because we all fall out of our fullness, That's part of the structure of reality. Then steps back in, and he finds himself, and he feels his tears close to the surface, and they're tears of ecstasy and tears of transformation and tears of longing. Right? And he finds himself, and then he begins to ripple. And then this what's called in the lineage, this power, this Eros, pours into cosmos, and Sab becomes the stunning reflection in which Sab's dear friend, the infinite intimate, finds herself in a way that she never could before. And in that sense, Sab quite literally causes there to be more God in the world, more God to come.
Wow.
Wow. Right? It's like, right?
Beautiful.
I'll do that. I'll be born with that.
Yeah. Wow. I love that. There's more God to come.
There's more God to come, and she comes through me. Right?
Wow.
It's unimaginably beautiful. And truth is beauty, and beauty is truth, and it's unimaginably true. It's not a declaration, not a dogma. It's the deepest realization of the interior sciences. Well, that's a big deal.
That is a big deal.
That's a big deal. Yeah.
So I'd mentioned about words and how words evolve as we, like, depending on almost like the place that we're operating from, the difference of where love shows up differently, or desire, how it can mean different
Let's go for it.
things.
Yeah, beautiful. Beautiful. No, that's beautiful. So you mentioned, the way desire is used in certain maps. And I think it's a bit of a misuse. And so we need to work with words. So let's play for a second, okay? I think let's work with this, okay? Let's work with words for a second and talk about how words themselves disclose their true meaning when they're refracted through the prism of different levels of consciousness. A, and B, when words are traced back to their original root and liberated from their kind of limited and degraded interpretations. So let's take desire and love, because those are your two examples. So desire is almost always critiqued, right, in the traditions, both the New Age traditions, right, the new spiritual maps, the old spiritual maps. Desire's had a rough run, right? Buddha gave it a hard time, and Christianity gave it a hard time, and Hawkins gives it a hard time, right? It's had a rough run. But actually, that's a mistake, because there's actually two forms of desire, and this is a mistake that if it's not corrected, you essentially get lost in shame. Because I am desire. Desire is not incidental to me. I quite literally am desire. And when I'm in the fullness of my desire, I'm fully alive. And my desire is not instrumental. It's not, my desire is self-validating. When I'm in the fullness of my desire, I don't ask what's the purpose of reality. I'm good. Right? When you're madly hungry, right, and you're about to eat this stunning meal, and you're cutting into this, incredibly gorgeous piece of food, and you're with like these great friends, and you're about to have the experience of eating together in communion, and you look around the table and you take the first bite, and it kind of moves through, and you're like, oh, right? You're not like, oh, why am I alive? Or you're a moment before orgasm with a beloved partner that you're madly and deeply in love with, and you're in right relationship, and you're like 1 minute before, and you're loving each other madly and loving reality open and pouring your love into the source code. You don't say, oh, let's talk about the meaning of life. No. The meaning of life becomes self-evident. And so
we're here.
There's pseudo desire, which is a form of pseudo eros, meaning a kind of contrived or pseudo desire or pseudo eros, which we use to cover up the hole, HOLE, to cover up the emptiness, right? So addictive pornography would fit into that, right? Excessive use of, recreational drugs would fit into that. Writing, 4,000 books might occasionally fit into that, right? In other words, right, but there's different things we do to cover up the emptiness. It might be work, and it might be play, and it doesn't matter what it is, but it doesn't emerge from our fullness. It covers up the emptiness. So pseudo desire, it actually obfuscates, blocks the emergence of unique self. But who am I? I am a unique configuration of reality's desire. And actually, evolution itself is the movement of desire. So who am I? I am my deepest heart's desire. I have a deepest heart's desire. And my deepest heart's desire is the desire of evolution itself living and moving in me. So we have to liberate the word desire from its shackles as pseudo eros and pseudo desire. The same thing's true about love. So we make a distinction in cosmoerotic humanism between ordinary love, which is the love you were describing, love which is a strategy of the ego. It's a purely human experience. It's an experience of radical ecstasy in the first 2 weeks of relationship. It's between you and only one other person. So we experience love as being a human emotion. Let me say it this way. We experience love in a fivefold contracted way. One is we limit love to the human world. 1. 2, we say love is an emotion. 3, we say love's a particular emotion, which is infatuation, right? 4, we say that we can love only a particular person. And 5, we exclude from love anything that doesn't fit into those 4. Right? And then we wonder why we're so devastated, right? When actually we feel that love has failed us. But love is actually none of those, right? Love is actually not merely a human emotion. It's not merely a human sentiment. Love is the heart of existence itself. 1, 2, right? Love actually is not merely an emotion. Love is a feeling, but it's a feeling that emerges from my capacity to see reality. Love is a perception. Love means I see you. And the Lineage has got this really clearly. And actually, a recent modern movie actually got a fragrance of this, right? When Cameron made Avatar. And the exchange between characters was, I see you. Right? So love is a perception, right? Love is a perception which the sexual models the erotic, right? But it's not about the sexual, it's about Eros. So I can love not only one person, but I can fall madly in love every day, right? In others, madly in love means I see you. I'm blown open by your beauty. I'm in devotion to you. I'm willing to bracket my ego for a moment to actually listen and be in service to you. That's what it means to be in love. Those are all qualities of being in love. And when I exile that love to a very particular social construct called ordinary love, which I activate to serve my security and comfort, well, that love disappears. That love dissipates. That love dies, right? So the idea is, or the invitation is, that my human love should participate in outrageous love. So when I say I love you outrageously, right? What I mean is my love for you, right, participates in the entire field of outrageous love. It's not unconditional love. It's not unconditional. Love shouldn't be unconditional. That's a ridiculous idea. Why is love unconditional? Love is, of course, related to the exchange between people. It's outrageous love, right? It's love, which is the love that moves the sun and other stars. That's literally moving uniquely in me. That's outrageous love, and that's infinitely more powerful than any other human experience, like that. So the play of words, right? How words evolve, and we need to liberate words, right, from their kind of narrow context and reclaim them in the fullness of their possibility. I mean, the word I love you is our sacred creed, right? And we know what our sacred creed is by what we say when we die, right? And so when people die today, what they actually want to say is, I love you, right? When the planes go into the World Trade Center and people are stuck tragically in the World Trade Center, or the plane that actually went down in 9/11 in the United States, and we have the cell phone records both from the plane that went down and from people who died in the World Trade Center. When they called home, right, they didn't recite Om Mani Padme Hum, and they didn't recite religious the Lord's Prayer or the Hebrew Shema Yisrael. They called home and they said, I love you, right? Because that's our sacred creed, but we've forgotten what it means. So and when words lose their meaning, culture collapses. Right? Thucydides in the Peloponnesian Wars. When words lose their meaning, culture collapses. So if our sacred creed is I love you, We need to reclaim that. I love you means I see you. I love you means I perceive your infinite specialness, and I'm willing to bracket my ego to be in devotion to you. I love you means I want to support the emergence of your unique self in the world and not use you only as an instrument to my end. I love you means I want to be dazzled by your beauty, and I want to be able to look at you and say, "Oh my God, you're stunningly beautiful," without feeling that's somehow inappropriate, right? And do it
Yeah.
in a way that's beautiful and whole and stunning, right? That and so my love participates in the love which is the heart of existence itself. How can you live without that? If you live without that, you're in violation of reality, and then you get sick.
And it feels like this is the importance of showing up as your unique self, because if you don't, you're actually not giving other people the opportunity to see you, which means you're not giving yourself the opportunity to be loved.
Right? You're not giving everyone around you the opportunity to care for you and love you, which is beautiful and gorgeously said, my friend. And you can only love through your unique set of eyes, because to be a lover is to see with God's eyes.
Mm.
It means to be a lover. To be a lover is to see with God's eyes. But God's eyes are not generic. God sees uniquely through Sab. So let me give you the second part of the sentence. So for Sab to love God is to let God see through Sab's eyes. Right? So when Sab clarifies his lens of perception and lets God see uniquely through his eyes, Sab is loving God. So to love God means to let God love through my eyes. To be a lover is to see through God's eyes, meaning it's a circle. It's a movement between the human being and divinity, which is mutually participatory. So if I love, I'm seeing, I'm pouring into, I can only love through my unique set of eyes. And I can't love you. It's not only you can't love me if I don't display my unique self, I can't love you if I'm not loving through my unique self. If I'm loving you through separate self, you're somehow an object, an instrument, an it in my game. You're serving my egoic emergence. You're serving my separate self. So I can't actually see you. It's only love means I, for a moment, bracket myself and I'm in devotion to you. That's what love means. Right? And then in that willingness to lose myself in devotion, I'm found. Right? Opposites are joined at the hip, or first principle of cosmos. I'm found when I lose myself in you and my devotion to you, right? In my perception of your infinite beauty. That's outrageous love. And that doesn't disappear. It's not an emotion, which is this purely physiological human experience where I kind of get hit by Cupid's arrow, right? And it kind of hits me up, hit the secretary, right? And then it dissipates. It's energy and motion that then dies. No, no, love is the heart of existence itself moving uniquely through me. And so it grows, the perception clarifies, it gets deeper, it gets sharper. So if I love you now at this level in a decade, can you imagine how insanely I'm going to love you? And we assume the opposite's true, right? We assume, well, I love you now, and we kind of know in 5 years it's going to be so much less, because we're not actually loving. We're actually using newness, right? I see a new person, new pair of breasts, new belly, right? New eyes. Wow, I'm excited for a moment. And then it's gone, and then I'm in an addictive movement. I need another pair and another body and another body and another body until I'm lost in this kind of addictive cycle and I can't see anymore, right? And so to love is not to see something new, it's to see with new eyes, right? Right, like that. Wow.
Wow.
Wow. Yeah. What a delight.
Incredible.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I wanted to share with you, just because it was one of those things that I was thinking about when I was just having a walk randomly. I was thinking about, what we are. And I was thinking, when I say I am, the moment I use a word, I feel like it's kind of reducing me to a word. Whatever the word is, when I get past am, I go, I am. I'm like, anything past that, I feel like is kind of reducing the essence. Like, how can the words truly say what I am? And then I thought, maybe we stop at I am. And then I thought, am is remarkably similar to om. And om being the essence of supreme absolute consciousness, I thought, well, maybe the answer's been hiding hiding the entire time. Every time I say I am, maybe it's I am Sabri, which is to say, or I am Mark, which is to say that you are the essence of supreme absolute consciousness with the
Beautiful.
flavor and in the shape of Mark.
Yeah, beautiful. Right. So that's a beautiful idea. And Sabri says, I am as I am, right? In some sense, right? I am the, you know, and of course that would be what you would be doing in that, beautiful play that you offer us so graciously. You'd be merging actually unique self with the notion of Om, because Om is a universal sound, which is more of a true self idea, right, in the lineages. And you're pointing out that actually I am Sab, I am Mark, right? I am Christina, I am Krista, is I'm a unique frequency, and I'm not just part of the vibration, I'm a unique and discrete frequency of the vibration. And that by itself is beautiful. Now, what's interesting and what's beautiful, let's maybe we can add something to it, which is the original Hebrew text, which is usually cited for I am that I am, right? It's cited as a text from the book of Exodus, actually reads originally in Hebrew, Eheyeh Asher Eheyeh. So that's translated in all the literature, I am that I am. Actually, what it means is, I will be what I will be. It's very beautiful, right? Meaning, I'm not only I am or I own eternal being, although that's absolutely my ground, right? I am the Tao, right? I am the ground, or I am true self. But I'm also emergent. I'm also called by tomorrow. I'm also I will be what I will be. So who I am is not where I am, it's where I'm facing towards, right? Which is very beautiful and very important, right? I'm always much more concerned with where a person is facing than where they are, right? Right? In other words, in the original Hebrew, there's a word called teshuvah. And teshuvah in English would be translated repentance, which is a pretty lousy English word. It kind of has this kind of, strange and heavy and inappropriate religious resonance in a negative sense. But it's not what the word means. Teshuvah means when you turn, it means to turn and to look in a different direction. So when you shift, when you turn your face, and the word panim, face, means actually to be on the inside, and paneh, to turn your interiority in a different direction. So it's where am I facing? Where am I going? Not so much where am I on the journey? Where am I going? And to actually set my direction, right? To have a North Star, right? To be responding, right, to the call of my unique self, even if I get up and fall, but I'm making mistakes in the right direction, is infinitely more important than where I am right now. Where I am right now is a function, into what we talked about earlier, of the noun of my life. It's the function of my yesterday. And everyone has yesterdays, and everyone has holy and broken hallelujahs. But I literally have the capacity to be called into this new possibility. And psychology, again, undermines it. But it's actually a metaphysical structure of the universe. Right? And the metaphysical structure of the universe is, there were molecules and then there were cells. There were cells and then there was multicellular life. Right? Meaning, literally, the new moment in time has the capacity to birth new emergence, and to actually that's actually the nature of my life. So we think that's true, and then psychology tells us that it's not quite true. No, it is. It is, and we need a new psychology that actually, and one of the things we're working at the center is on a kind of new step in psychology, where we actually integrate the unique self principles, right, into a genuine pragmatic psychology. Yes, sir. Take us the next step. Good.
Incredible. Thank you so much for being on. Now, for anyone who hasn't listened to you before, once they've managed to put their head back on after it's been blown off, where can they find you?
Well, first off, thank you. Thank you for your kind invitation, and thank everyone for listening. And if you want to spend some time with us. There's a weekly broadcast we do called One Mountain, Many Paths. And if I'm sure Crystal will get you the information so we can run it across screens or whatever people do. We're also getting together, and maybe even better than coming to Vermont, come to the mystery school this summer. We're doing a mystery school in Europe, August 21st to 25th in Belgium. And Crystal will find that information to you as well. It's a 5-day mystery school on a new vision of Eros and sexuality and unique self. And it's 5 just, stunning days, fantastic music, people. And it's actually this commitment both to our own transformation, but also to respond to the meta crisis through our own transformation and transform culture itself. And it's the knowing that my transformation transforms the whole thing. And we're doing it. This is the 11th year we're doing it. And it's the one time we kind of get together live in this particular way. It's called the Eros Mystery School. And so everyone's like madly welcome to come to that and find your way, everybody, right? Like take a step, like a leap, step in, we need you, we need you desperately. And Sab, you're doing a gorgeous job. I'm so excited and delighted that you're stepping up and stepping in. And I'm sure this is but the beginning of a beginning, right? Gorgeous. Thank you, friend.
I believe so. Thank you so much, brother.
Yay.